Emulator or real thing? Emulator or real thing? Which is best? Let's find out. Hi and welcome to Bytes and Bits. We all know that retro computing is a fantastic way to experience the history of computing and gaming from the past 50 or so years. You can trace the development of computer technology, which is probably the most influential form of technology ever created, and relive its application to the entertainment industry as gaming grew to become the biggest earning area in this market. But owning a collection of vintage machines can get very expensive. So is it worth this expense, or can emulating these computers give you just as much fun? So my quick answer to this is that if you truly want to experience retro computing, you really can't beat the real thing. Having the actual machine in front of you with the authentic look, feel, smell and sounds is something special and not something you can recreate with emulation. But, and there is a big but, you're dealing with very old pieces of equipment. Keeping these machines in running order is a hobby in itself. Parts break, components fail, peripherals become out of date and incompatible. And if you're into electronics, this challenge in itself is actually one of the best bits of retro computing. But for most of us who just want to play the games, it just becomes a hassle that gets in the way of our enjoyment. So which route is the best way to go? And as usual, this is going to depend on your personal preferences, but we can look at a few areas that you should really consider. So one of the biggest differences is in the cost. Original retro computers are in short supply, simply because they're no longer being made and the global stock is slowly dying from old age. You can still get hold of most systems, but the costs are generally increasing, especially if you want to get one in good working condition. On top of this basic system cost, you'll also need some extra hardware to be able to use these computers. So not all will plug into a modern monitor or TV, so you'll either need an original display or some sort of adapter. Storage devices like floppy disk drives and cassette recorders, and original software tapes and discs can be difficult to get a reliable setup. Even the actual blank media can be hard to locate, especially if it's for one of the proprietary systems such as the Sinclair QL's microdrives. Now there are usually SD card-based solutions, but again these add to the overall cost. This cost, of course, is for a single computer system. If you're building up a collection, you'll have to pay for each separately. Now some of the peripherals like displays and tape decks will be common to most, but mostly you'll have to buy parts for each machine. Compare this to emulation, and you've probably already got all the bits you need sitting right in front of you. Any fairly modern computer will let you emulate almost every retro computer, console or arcade machine that ever existed. Emulators are almost always free, and getting hold of the software is as simple as a download. Now I have made a few videos on how to get everything all up and running and set up on your computer or your Raspberry Pi, so please do check out the rest of my channel for those tutorials, and I'll put some links to those in the descriptions down below. And of course, while you're there, please make sure to click on the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. The only real expense in emulation is to maybe get hold of some game controllers. If you're into arcade games, you can't beat a proper arcade joystick and buttons. And if you like the old consoles, you can get original style game pads to get that authentic gaming feel. But all of these will cost much less than buying a real system. So if we think about general maintenance then, as I already mentioned, by definition retro computer systems are old. Some are now getting on for 50 years old, and time really is the enemy of any product. And you'll find that parts will start to fail. Now keyboards, switches, disk drives, these all contain moving mechanical parts, and these will eventually wear out and fail. Power supplies use electrolytic capacitors, which wear out, and those too need to be replaced. Now, all of these sorts of failures can usually be fixed fairly easily. But there are some components, especially bespoke parts such as ULA chips, that you can't simply buy replacements for. For these, you're going to need an actual donor computer to scavenge more parts from. Now, having said all that, fault finding and fixing these computers is actually very good fun. And as I mentioned earlier, it's almost like a hobby in itself. Many of the circuits use discrete integrated circuits and components which do actually allow you to trace the signals and actually identify which of the items have been broken. Now, you will of course need some good test equipment to do this, but it can be done. And indeed, taking apart a broken 40-year-old computer and making it work again does give you a great sense of satisfaction. On the other hand though, emulation doesn't suffer from hardware failures, or at least as long as your main computer is working. Your emulator and software, they'll just continue to work as long as that's up and running. Any controllers that break are very easy and cheap to replace. We can also start looking at storage space, and by this I mean physical storage space rather than hard disk space. So all computers do take up space, especially if you're going to have them set up and ready to run. And each retro system has to be stored when it's not in use, and then unpacked and set up with a display and storage device when you want to play your games. Now, once you've got a couple of systems, this can start to eat up storage space and desk space. So again, emulators win out in this area. So your PC or laptop is usually always ready to go. And if you're using something like a Raspberry Pi as a gaming console, it can very easily fit behind your TV. The software for these machines, or these emulators, sorry, lives on your hard drive or on your SD card. So your retro computing system basically takes up no space at all. So far, real machines haven't really come across as a great idea. But there is one place where emulators do fall down, and that is in authenticity. Emulators are great, but they're not the real thing. You can play the games and use the software, and you can have all the fun that goes with that, but you can't get that authentic experience. There's something magical about having the actual machine in front of you. Using computers in the 1980s and 90s was very different from using computers today. When you turned on your BBC Micro or Commodore 64, you got a blank screen with a flashing cursor, and you had to know what to do to get from there to playing a game. Loading discs and cassette tapes into the relevant drives, queuing up the content and getting the computer to load the software, it took effort and time, and it's not something you can easily simulate. Now, although it sounds like a lot of hassle, and thinking back, yes it was at the time, it's all part of that retro experience. Watching flashing lines as your Spectrum loaded from cassette tape, waiting for 5 minutes, and actually listening to the digital data is all part of the appeal. Of course, when it comes to using a computer, we all deal with the keyboard. So keyboards on retro computers, they also felt very different. Nowadays keyboards are fairly generic. So yes, you've got mechanical switches and membranes and so on, but any keyboard could be any computer. Now, each retro machine had its very own unique feel when you used it. This ranges from the ZX80's sort of feeble excuse for a keyboard, through the rubber matte ZX Spectrum, and onto some really great mechanical keyboards from Commodore and the BBC machines. And you could really tell what computer you were using by this feel alone. So from this authentic hardware experience point of view, the real machines do win hands down. On the software side though, emulators are almost an exact replica of what the old machines could manage in terms of look, speed and feel. Now, if you're being very, very picky, you'd see some differences, but to be honest, they're generally very hard to spot, and in no way do they spoil your enjoyment of these machines. Having said that, again, although the image and sound are almost authentic, the actual gaming experience you'll get from an emulator, it still has that modern feel to it. So in conclusion then, are emulators better? Well, as always, this is a yes and no answer, and it's going to depend on you. For me, emulators are the way to go. I simply want to enjoy the games and easily browse through all of the old computer and consoles and arcade machines without any sort of hassle. I don't want my office crammed full of old hardware, and I want to be able to use a spare half hour to indulge in a few levels of Manic Miner without having to spend an hour setting up my retro system. When I do want to experience the real thing, I can go to a computer museum. Now, if you haven't been to one, I do highly recommend you go. You'll get the chance to get your hands on with pretty much every computer system you can think of. Most museums have computers and consoles set up and ready for you to play. If you can't see what you want, talk to the staff. If there's something you don't see, they'll usually be able to sort something out for you, and we'll be very happy to do so. Now, I live in the centre of UK in England, and we usually go to the Centre of Computing History in Cambridge. And the people there, from every time we've been there, they can't be more helpful and informative. And I know that here in the UK there are a number of really great computer museums, and I suspect the same is true for other countries. So do check out their events and family games nights, and you'll always find something to do. Now, if you don't have a computer museum nearby, look out for retro computer clubs or exhibitions, and these are another great way to get up and personal with the original hardware. So whatever way you decide to go, emulation or the real thing, do have fun and keep on gaming. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please make sure to click the like button and subscribe to my channel. I'm continually making retro gaming, coding and making videos, so you'll be able to view them as soon as I make them. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon, and bye for now. For more games programming, electronics projects and retro gaming, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit my website.